The people of Umokpara were a small but resilient community nestled between vast rivers and dense forest. For centuries, their small stature and peaceful nature had made them easy targets for their more aggressive neighbors, the people of Umuego. Larger in number and known for their prowess in war, they had long tormented Umokpara, raiding their villages, kidnapping their people, and selling them into slavery during the era of the transatlantic slave trade. For years, the people of Umokpara endured this cruelty, but their patience was thin. A deep anger stirred within them, and their leaders decided it was time to take a stand. Led by their determined King Ijemba, they declared war on Umuego. The people of Umuego laughed at this audacity, confident of their superiority. They mocked Umokpara and allowed them the privilege of choosing the battlefield, sure that they would crush their smaller foes anywhere. The people of Umokpara, however, chose a location that sent ripples of confusion through Umuego, the Honor River. The Honor River was a vast, tranquil waterway, known for its mysterious depths and the stories of spirits that dwelled within. While Umuego assumed it was a strategic choice, they had no idea of the desperate bargain King Ijemba had made in the dead of night. Consumed by the need to protect his people, King Ijemba sought the aid of the river goddess, a powerful spirit said to inhabit the Honor River. With trembling hands and a heavy heart, he made an unimaginable sacrifice, his first and most beloved son, Prince Obidike. He placed the boy, barely 10 years old, on an altar by the river's edge and pleaded with the goddess. "Take my son, my heart's treasure," the king cried. "In return, grant my people victory over their tormentors and protect us from destruction. I vow that no one will ever fish or disturb your waters again. This river shall be yours forever." The river goddess appeared before King Ijemba, her presence as immense and powerful as the river itself. Her voice echoed like the wind stirring the waters, carrying both a warning and a blessing. "Do not harm your child as a sacrifice, King Ijemba," the goddess intoned. "I will grant your request, but you must honor the treaty made here today. The entire Honor River, with all its creatures and spirits, shall belong to me and my kind forever. It shall be sacred, untouched by your people, and any who defy this pact will feel my wrath." King Ijemba, overwhelmed with relief and hope, bowed before the goddess. "I promise, great goddess, I shall keep my word. No harm shall come to the river or its waters again. I will ensure that this treaty is honored for as long as my kingdom endures." The goddess nodded once, a shimmer of approval in her eyes. Without another word, she vanished beneath the water, leaving behind only ripples that spread across the surface. The king, his heart filled with gratitude, hurried back to his people. With the blessing of the river goddess and the power she bestowed upon them, he knew victory was certain. The people of Umokpara, proud and confident, had no idea what awaited them. Days later, when the battle with Umuego finally came, the warriors of Umokpara were filled with an energy they had never known before. It was as if the river itself had infused them with its strength. The earth trembled as the battle cries rang through the air, and as the armies met, the Honor River, once calm and peaceful, began to roar in a wild fury. The water people rose and joined the battle with the people of Umokpara. The warriors of Umuego were taken by surprise, their feet unsteady in the waters that rose and surged as though alive. Waves swirled around them, pulling them into the depths, while the air itself seemed to carry an eerie chant, echoing the voices of mermaid spirits. The tide of battle quickly turned in favor of Umokpara, and within hours, the once mighty Umuego army was in retreat, leaving behind only the wreckage of their pride. As the dust settled, the people of Umokpara stood victorious. But their triumph was not just of weapons. It was the river goddess that had granted them their strength. King Ijemba knew that their victory was not just a result of human effort, but of the deep, unspoken bond forged that night with the river goddess. To ensure that no one ever violated the sacred pact, he issued a decree so severe that it struck fear into the hearts of his people. "Anyone who dares to fish from the Honor River, the king declared, shall be sacrificed to the river, along with their entire family. The goddess has granted us her protection, and we must honor her forever. The severity of the decree ensured obedience. For generations, no one dared approach the river with fishing nets or boats. The Honor River became a place of reverence and mystery, its waters untouched and sacred. Years turned into decades, and eventually, King Ijemba passed away, his legacy etched into the hearts of his people. His great-great-grandson, King Ikena, now sat on the throne. By the time of Ikena's reign, the world had changed. Civilization and modernization had transformed the lives of the people of Umokpa. The ancient rivalries between villages had long ceased, and a newfound era of peace and prosperity reigned. With the passing of time, the story of King Ijemba's pact with the river goddess began to fade. To some, it was still a tale of reverence passed down from elders to children as a warning to others. To others, it had become a diluted folk tale, exaggerated by the passage of time. The Honor River, once a place of fear and worship, was now seen by many as simply a beautiful waterway. The river had become home to various kinds of exotic fish and aquatic animals, thriving in its undisturbed ecosystem. Fishermen from neighboring villages often looked upon its sparkling waters with envy, wondering why no one dared to cast their nets there. Rumors circulated that the fish in the Honor River were larger, more abundant, and more exotic than anywhere else in the land. King Ikena, though wise and forward-thinking, had grown up in an era where the tales of the river goddess were regarded as little more than myths. The once revered stories had been reduced to bedtime tales, and the strict laws of his great-great-grandfather were now viewed as relics of a bygone era. One day, a group of ambitious young men approached King Ikena with an idea. "Your Majesty," one of them said, "the Honor River is a treasure that has been left untouched for centuries. Think of the wealth it could bring if we allowed fishing, or even built a bridge to connect our villages. The old stories of gods and spirits are just that, stories. Surely it is time to put these superstitions behind us and make use of what the river offers." At first, King Ikena was hesitant. He had grown up hearing the warnings of his elders, even if they seemed outdated now. But the allure of progress and prosperity was strong. The kingdom was thriving, yet the promise of further wealth and trade tempted him. "Perhaps," King Ikena said, "we should revisit these old laws. Times have changed, and we must change with them. Let us hold a council and discuss this matter further." Word of the king's consideration spread quickly through Umokpa. The elders, who still held the sacred stories close to their hearts, were horrified. They begged King Ikena to reconsider, warning him that breaking the ancient pact would bring disaster upon the kingdom. "Your Majesty," one elder said, "the river goddess does not forget. The stories may seem like mere tales to you, but they are warnings etched in the blood of our ancestors. Do not let ambition blind you to the consequences." After much deliberation, King Ikena sighed deeply and reluctantly dismissed the request to fish in the Honor River. Though his decision was final, it left the court divided. Many were relieved to see the old laws upheld, while others grumbled about missed opportunities for progress and prosperity. This decision, however, pained the king's younger son, Prince Arin, more than anyone else. The prince had long coveted the untouched bounty of the river. The tales of its exotic fish and the wealth it could bring filled his mind with dreams of grandeur. Arin, arrogant and self-centered, saw himself as a visionary, someone who could lead the kingdom into a brighter future if only the old superstitions weren't holding them back. Arin was not just any prince. He was the king's favorite, the last child of King Ikena and the only one born of his beloved second wife, Queen Adiko, who had died giving birth to him. The tragic loss of his wife had made the king fiercely protective of Arin, showering him with love and indulgence. Arin had grown up with no sense of discipline, no respect for tradition, and a deep entitlement that made him believe he could do whatever he pleased. When King Ikena announced his decision to uphold the ban on the Honor River, Arin stormed into the royal chambers, his face flushed with anger. "Father," he began, his voice sharp and accusing. "Why do you let these old fools dictate the future of our kingdom? The Honor River is a gift. We could prosper beyond measure, yet you cling to ghost stories and childish fears. Why should we let an imaginary goddess hold us back?" King Ikena frowned, his patience wearing thin. "Arins, you speak of things you do not understand. The pact with the river goddess is sacred. It was forged in blood to save our people. It is not fear that guides my decision, but respect, for the past and for the forces that govern this land." "Respect?" Arin scoffed. "It is cowardice, father. You are king, not some servant to a long-forgotten goddess. The river belongs to us, not to some spirit." The king stood and fixed his son with a stern gaze. "Enough, Arins. I have made my decision, and it is final. You will not speak of this again." But Arins was not one to be silenced. Though he bowed and left the chamber, his heart burned with resentment. He could not understand why his father, a powerful king, would bow to what he saw as baseless fears. To Arins, the river was an opportunity, a treasure waiting to be claimed. And he was determined to claim it, no matter the cost. That night, as the kingdom slept, Arin sat by his window, gazing out at the moonlit waters of the Honor River. Its surface glimmered with an ethereal light, as though mocking him with its untapped potential. "If my father will not act," he muttered to himself, "then I will. I will show him and everyone else that there is nothing to fear." With that, Arins hatched a plan. He would venture into the river in secret at night and cast the first nets into its forbidden waters. He would bring back the riches of the Honor River and prove to the kingdom that the old stories were nothing more than myths. As the prince prepared for his secret expedition, far beneath the surface of the Honor River, the water began to churn ever so slightly. The goddess, silent for generations, was stirring. Her sacred pact had remained unbroken for centuries, but she could feel the arrogance of the young prince, a spark of defiance that threatened to unleash her wrath. Arins, blinded by his ambition, was unaware of the ancient power he was about to awaken. That night, Prince Arins ventured into the forbidden Honor River with his fishing gear, driven by a mixture of arrogance and excitement. Setting up camp by the riverbank, he cast his net into the sacred waters. To his amazement, within seconds, he began catching the largest, most beautiful fish he had ever seen. Their scales glittered like precious jewels under the moonlight, and their vibrant colors made them look almost otherworldly. Arin's heart swelled with pride and joy as he hauled in one big catch after another. The bounty seemed endless, and with every pull of his net, his confidence grew. He chuckled to himself, thinking how foolish the elders and his father had been to keep such treasures hidden for centuries. When he felt he had caught enough, Arins packed up his gear and the glistening fish, completely unaware of the ancient forces he had just defied. He returned to the palace and ordered the royal cooks to prepare the fish for the king's dinner. When the meal was served, King Ikena was astounded. The fish was unlike anything he had ever tasted, delicate, flavorful, and rich beyond compare. He marveled at the dish, praising it lavishly. "Who brought such an exquisite meal to my table?" the king asked, curiosity and delight evident in his voice. The servants informed him that it was his son, Prince Arins, who had procured the fish. Intrigued, the king summoned Arins to inquire where the fish had come from. Arins, quick to lie and cover his tracks, smiled confidently. "A fisherman from the neighboring village brought them to me, father," he said. "They were the finest catch in all the land, and I couldn't resist buying them for you." The king, thoroughly impressed, ordered more of the fish to be bought and prepared for him every day. Encouraged by his father's enthusiasm, Arins continued his nightly trips to the Honor River, fishing in secret and basking in the compliments his catches brought him. But his nightly ventures did not go unnoticed by the river goddess and her children. The river, once serene and undisturbed, began to ripple with unease. Still, the goddess trusted that the sacred pact would hold, unaware of the depth of Arin's defiance. One fateful day, while the goddess's children played at the water's edge, their laughter echoing softly through the trees, Arin approached the river. His footsteps startled them, and in a panic, they transformed into enormous fish to escape detection. Arin, catching sight of these magnificent creatures, was overwhelmed with greed. "Such fish," he exclaimed. "This will surely make me a legend in my father's court." He cast his net with unmatched fervor, capturing several of the goddess's children in one swoop. Pride surged through him as he carried his catch to the riverbank. Among the fish was a particularly large and radiant one, its scales shimmering with an almost ethereal glow. Unaware of its true nature, Arin decided to prepare and eat it right there by the river. He killed the glowing fish, set up a fire, and began grilling it. The aroma wafted through the air, filling him with a sense of triumph. Deep beneath the river's surface, the goddess, distracted with other matters, was suddenly alerted by the cries of her remaining children. "Mother! Mother," they wailed. "A human has taken our sister. He's on the land. Hurry!" The goddess surged through the water with the speed of a cheetah, her heart pounding with dread. As she emerged from the river with a force that shook the ground, she was met with the most heart-wrenching sight: Arin, seated by the fire, savoring the flesh of her most beloved daughter. The radiant scales of the fish glistened dully in the flames as Arin took another bite, oblivious to the devastating wrath gathering before him. The goddess let out a piercing scream, her voice shaking the very earth and sky. The waters of the Honor River rose violently behind her, churning with fury. Arin, startled, dropped his food and turned to see the towering figure of the river goddess, her eyes blazing with grief and rage. The night immediately turned to bright day, and her deafening scream reverberated across the land, shattering glass, cracking stone, and causing the very earth beneath him to tremble. Her voice was like the roar of 1,000 storms, her fury echoing in every corner of the community. Arin, unable to withstand the sound, cupped his hands over his ears and began to run as fast as he could. Panic surged through him as he fled from the wrathful presence that pursued him. The bright daylight burned his eyes, as if the sun itself had been torn from the sky and cast down upon him. He ran through the village, past terrified villagers who had been jolted from their sleep, all of them staring up in confusion at the unnatural daylight. The air was thick with fear, and no one understood what had happened or why the night had been violently ripped away. With his heart pounding, Arin reached the palace, breathless and trembling. He burst through the grand doors, and the sight that greeted him only added to his panic. The king, his war council, and the palace guards were already on high alert, having been roused by the sudden chaos. The war council assumed the worst, an attack from the neighboring villages. The warriors were already assembling, preparing for a siege. But the moment they saw Arin, all that preparation ground to a halt. His disheveled appearance, his wide eyes, and his frantic state made them pause. "Father, please help me!" Arin screamed, his voice cracking with terror. He fell to his knees before King Ikena, his fear overwhelming him. King Ikena, confused and alarmed, stepped forward. "What have you done, son? What is happening?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with worry. Arin gasped for breath, shaking uncontrollably. "Father, I have done something terrible. I fished from the Honor River, and I caught one of the river goddess's children. I killed it, and I grilled it." His words spilled out in a torrent, barely making sense. "It was our daughter. I didn't know. I didn't know. And then she came, the goddess. She screamed and turned the night into day. That scream you heard, Father, it was her. She is coming for me." We are cursed, all of us. She will destroy everything. King Ikena stood frozen, his mind racing as he processed his son's words. He had long known of the pact his ancestors had made with the river goddess, and he had always respected it, but he had never imagined that anyone would dare to break it. The gravity of Arin's actions hit him like a bolt of lightning. Arin's. King Ikena's voice was low and filled with both fear and disbelief. How could you be so reckless? Do you understand what you've done? You've defiled the pact that has kept our people safe for generations. You've angered the river goddess and brought her wrath upon us all. Arin's face crumpled with guilt and fear. Father, I was so blinded by greed, by the thought of riches and glory. I never thought of the consequences. I didn't know who I was really dealing with. I didn't know she was watching. I'm sorry, Father. Please save us. I beg you. The king turned away, his face a mask of regret and sorrow. You've condemned us all, Arins. Just then, the earth seemed to tremble once again. The palace doors flew open with an unnatural force, and the sky above darkened, even as the sun continued to blaze down in the unholy daylight. A wave of cold air surged through the chambers as a shadow swept across the courtyard. The river goddess herself appeared, towering before them like a living storm, her eyes blazing with unfathomable fury. The ground beneath her seemed to crack and writhe, as if the very earth was rebelling against her presence. The air thickened with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of the goddess's voice, which now carried the weight of millennia. You fool, she said to King Ikena, her voice cold and ancient. Your son has broken the sacred pact. He has dared to kill my daughters, and for that there will be consequences. The river goddess's voice echoed through the air, and with a sweeping gesture, she turned to the people, her gaze filled with an ominous fury. Your king and his insolent family have brought this upon you all, she proclaimed, her words sending a chill through the hearts of the villagers. By midnight tomorrow, he and his entire family are to be sacrificed to me by the Honor River. Or, by midnight, every firstborn child of this kingdom will surely die. A wave of fear swept over the people as the enormity of the goddess's words sank in. The villagers, horrified at the thought of losing their children, turned towards the king with angry, accusing eyes. Murmurs of betrayal filled the air, and before King Ikena or Arins could react, the crowd surged forward. With trembling hands, they seized both the king and his son. The people's anger was undeniable. They blamed them for the wrath that had come upon the land, and their fear for their children was stronger than any allegiance to the royal family. The king and Arins were dragged through the streets, their pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. They searched for the rest of the royal family, but some had fled in fear of the goddess's wrath. In the end, only the king and Arins remained to face the terrible judgment that had been set before them. The villagers, led by the priest of the river, marched towards the Honor River. As they arrived, the water churned violently, and the river goddess emerged, her presence a dark and powerful force. The priest began the ancient rites of sacrifice, calling upon the power of the river goddess to cleanse the land and restore balance. As the last incantation was spoken, the goddess raised her hand, and the waters of the river swelled with immense force. Without warning, the river's depths opened, swallowing King Ikena and his son Arins. Their screams were drowned by the sound of the rushing water, and the land fell eerily silent. With the sacrifice completed, the river goddess stood before the people, her voice soft but commanding. This kingdom shall be cleansed, she said. The next king shall be the poorest man in the community, one who will honor the pact that King Eima made with me. Only he shall reign with the humility and reverence that I demand from those who govern this land. The villagers, though sorrowful for the loss of their king, bowed in submission, understanding that the goddess's decree was not to be challenged. The priest called upon the people to select a new king, and after much deliberation, the most humble man in the village, a farmer named Ugochukwu, was chosen. He was a man known for his honesty, simplicity, and reverence for the sacred laws of the land. With Ugochukwu now on the throne, the kingdom was reborn. The Ona River, once a place of fear, was now revered as a sacred water that could never again be fished from.